The morning sun had barely risen over the city, and the streets were already busy with people hurrying to work. She walked to the small cafe where she worked, her steps light but her mind heavy with the usual thoughts of the day. The cafe was modest, tucked between taller buildings, but it had a charm that regular customers liked. Inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of baked pastries, and the low hum of conversations created a soft, welcoming atmosphere. She tied her apron and checked the order list on the counter. Today promised to be busy, as it usually was on weekdays. She greeted the early customers with a warm smile, taking their orders, serving coffee, and making sure the pastries were fresh. Her movements were practiced and smooth, showing years of experience in this routine. People knew her as polite, attentive, and hardworking, but they saw her only in the context of this everyday work. Few imagined there was more to her than the apron and the counter. In one corner of the cafe sat an old piano. It had been there for years, mostly ignored. The paint on its surface was chipped, and some of the keys were slightly yellowed, but it still held an air of quiet dignity. She often passed it when she cleaned the tables or brought out fresh pastries. Sometimes, she would glance at it and remember the lessons she had taken as a child. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to feel the notes under her hands again, but life had taken her in a different direction. Family responsibilities, school, and then work had kept her from playing regularly. The piano had become a silent companion in the background of her daily life. Despite her busy schedule, she sometimes hummed melodies under her breath while she worked. She would catch herself tapping a rhythm on the counter or on the side of a cup. Music was her secret companion, a part of her that was hers alone. It was a world she could enter quietly in the few moments when no one was watching. The cafe was her stage in this way, even if no one knew it. As the morning wore on, the cafe began to fill with more customers. Business people came in for coffee, students stopped by to grab a quick snack, and regulars came for the comfort of familiar faces. She moved from table to table, smiling, taking orders, refilling drinks, and making sure everyone was happy. It was tiring work, but she had grown used to it. There was a rhythm to her day, a flow that she had learned to follow. During a quiet moment, she approached the piano while wiping down the counter. Her hand brushed lightly against the keys, and she felt a familiar warmth in her fingers. She sat down briefly, just to touch the keys, letting her mind drift back to the melodies she used to play. She remembered the music she loved, the pieces that made her heart race, the songs that made her feel like she could express something words never could. For a few moments, she let herself imagine being on a stage, performing for an audience, feeling the notes come alive under her hands. She had always dreamed of playing publicly again, but life had a way of keeping her dreams small and tucked away. Money was tight, and her responsibilities were many. She couldn't imagine leaving her steady job for the uncertainty of a musical career. But in these stolen moments by the piano, she allowed herself to feel the spark of possibility. The music reminded her that she was more than her daily routine, more than the apron and the coffee cups. There was a side of her that still belonged to music, and it refused to be forgotten. The lunch rush arrived quickly. People filled the cafe, chatting and laughing. She moved quickly between tables, balancing trays, taking orders, and keeping the kitchen informed. Even in the chaos, her mind occasionally drifted to the piano. She wondered what it would feel like to play again, really play with all the emotion and skill she had tucked away. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the work at hand. But a small part of her held on to that longing, a secret hope that one day, there might be an opportunity to share her music again. A few customers noticed her glancing at the piano from time to time. Some smiled, thinking she liked the instrument, but none guessed the depth of her connection to it. They saw a friendly waitress, someone who worked hard and knew her job well. No one knew that behind her polite demeanor, there was a woman who could bring a room to silence with the touch of her fingers on the keys. As the afternoon sun poured through the windows, the cafe became quieter again. A few regulars lingered, talking softly, reading newspapers or working on laptops. She took a moment to rest, leaning against the counter and sipping a glass of water. Her thoughts drifted to the old piano, sitting quietly in its corner. She imagined the sound of it filling the room, notes floating in the air and touching everyone in the cafe. She smiled at the thought, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun outside. That evening, the cafe was busier than usual. Word had spread that a wealthy businessman was coming to the cafe for a private meeting. The staff were curious, and she found herself tidying up with extra care, wanting everything to be perfect. She wondered what it would be like to see someone of such importance in the cafe. She had served people from all walks of life, but there was something different about this kind of attention, a mix of excitement and nervousness. As she prepared tables and arranged the chairs, she caught herself looking at the piano again. The keys seemed to call to her, whispering possibilities she had almost forgotten. She shook her head slightly, reminding herself to focus on her work. Still, she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation, a tiny spark that something unusual might happen tonight. The cafe had always been ordinary, a place where people came and went, but somehow, she had the feeling that tonight could be different. The afternoon passed, and the cafe settled into its evening rhythm. Families came in for dinner, friends gathered to chat, and the soft light from the lamps created a cozy, inviting space. She continued her work, taking orders, serving drinks, and clearing tables with practiced efficiency. Her feet ached from standing, and her hands were tired, but her mind occasionally wandered to the piano. She imagined sitting down and playing, feeling the music flow naturally once more. When the businessman arrived, the atmosphere shifted slightly. He was calm, composed, and clearly important. The staff moved quickly to accommodate him and his companions. She greeted them with a polite smile, taking orders and making sure everything was in place. She noticed him glancing around the cafe, his eyes landing briefly on the piano. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face, but he said nothing. She felt a flutter of excitement and nerves at the thought that he might notice her connection to the instrument. The evening continued, and she worked diligently, serving tables, refilling drinks, and keeping everything running smoothly. Yet, the piano remained in her mind, a quiet presence that reminded her of the music she loved. She touched the keys lightly as she passed, feeling the familiar texture under her fingers and remembering the joy it had once brought her. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine playing for an audience, even if it was just the businessman and his companions. The thought made her heart beat faster, a mix of fear and anticipation. As the night grew later, the cafe began to empty. She cleared the last tables, wiped down the counters, and took a deep breath, feeling the satisfaction of a day well spent. Yet, the piano still called to her, a gentle invitation she could not ignore. She approached it once more, her fingers hovering over the keys. The room was quiet now, and she allowed herself to imagine the music flowing freely, the notes filling the air and touching everyone in the space. She felt a warmth in her chest, a reminder that this talent had never truly left her. She sat down at the piano, hesitating for a moment as her fingers hovered over the keys. The memory of her childhood lessons came rushing back, the melodies she had learned, the rhythm of her own heart reflected in the music. She pressed a key, then another, and soon the sound began to fill the cafe. It was soft at first, uncertain, but it grew stronger as she remembered the pieces she loved. The music wrapped around the room, gentle and expressive, carrying a part of her that had long been hidden. For a few precious moments, she forgot the work, the responsibilities, and the ordinary life she led. The cafe disappeared, replaced by the world of music she had always loved. Each note was a word, each melody a story, and she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The piano was no longer just an object in the corner. It was a bridge to her dreams, a reminder of who she was and what she could do when she allowed herself to believe. The night ended with the music lingering in the air, a quiet testament to her hidden talent. She sat back, her hands resting on the keys, feeling both exhaustion and a deep sense of fulfillment. The cafe was nearly empty now, but the memory of the music remained, a spark of possibility that she carried with her as she finished her shift. It was a reminder that even in an ordinary life, extraordinary moments could happen if one dared to listen to the quiet call of their own talent. The evening air was cool and the cafe was beginning to settle into its quieter rhythm. Most of the customers had left, and the remaining few were scattered at tables, absorbed in their conversations or phones. She wiped the counter for the 100th time, but her mind was not on the cleaning. It was on the piano, which sat silently in its corner like an old friend waiting patiently. As she passed by it, the piano seemed to call to her more insistently than before. She hesitated, her heart pounding, remembering how long it had been since she last played in front of anyone. The old piano looked ordinary to the eye, but to her, it was a doorway to something she had almost forgotten. Her fingers tingled with a mix of excitement and fear as she brushed them over the keys. Then, something unexpected happened. The millionaire who had arrived earlier in the day was still in the cafe. He was sitting at a table near the piano, quietly observing, and he seemed interested in her. He motioned slightly toward the piano and gave her a nod that was more than polite. It was an invitation. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should accept. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling just a little, while her mind raced. She had never played for strangers before, not since childhood competitions and lessons. The idea was terrifying, but the pull was irresistible. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the piano bench. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm her racing heart, and pressed her fingers onto the first few keys. A soft, hesitant note rang out. It was uncertain, almost shy, but it was the first sound she had made on this piano in years. The millionaire leaned forward slightly, his expression curious but patient. He did not speak or interrupt. He simply waited, as if giving her permission to take the moment however she needed. That quiet encouragement gave her a little courage. She pressed another key, and then another, gradually finding a rhythm she remembered from years of practice. The notes began to flow more smoothly, each one more confident than the last. At first, the music was simple, almost cautious, but it grew richer as she let herself get lost in it. Memories of old lessons and favorite pieces came rushing back. She could feel the melodies in her hands, the patterns her fingers had known before, and the piano seemed to respond as if it had been waiting for this moment. Her confidence grew with every chord, and the cafe, which had seemed ordinary all day, transformed into a stage in her mind. Some of the remaining customers noticed the change. Heads turned as the soft, melodic sound filled the room. Conversations dwindled, and even the clinking of cups seemed to fade into the background. Her music was taking over, wrapping the cafe in a gentle, enchanting atmosphere. The millionaire's attention was focused entirely on her, his usually composed face showing a flicker of surprise and admiration. For her, the feeling was unlike anything she had experienced in years. She was no longer just a waitress finishing her shift. She was a musician, a storyteller, a woman expressing herself in a way words could never capture. Every note was a piece of her heart, a fragment of all the dreams she had tucked away. She played with emotion and precision, moving her hands effortlessly across the keys, each chord telling a story of longing, courage, and hidden talent. The more she played, the more she noticed subtle shifts around her. The cafe owner, who had been quietly doing dishes, stopped mid-motion to listen. A couple sitting near the window looked up from their phones, captivated by the music. Even the few regulars who had lingered seemed drawn in, smiling quietly, eyes wide with surprise. She could feel the energy in the room changing, a sense of awe spreading among everyone present. It was not just that she could play the piano. It was the way she played with sincerity and passion. The millionaire, known for being difficult to impress, was leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on her, absorbing every note. His usual air of calm detachment seemed to have melted away, replaced by genuine interest. She felt a small thrill of pride, though she tried to focus on the music rather than on the reactions around her. Time seemed to stretch and compress at the same time. Minutes passed, yet it felt like hours. She moved through different melodies, some soft and gentle, others more lively and expressive. Each one seemed to tell a different story, revealing parts of her personality that she had hidden for too long. She could feel herself becoming part of the music, her emotions intertwining with the sound in a way that was both exhilarating and calming. As she continued, she remembered the nights as a child when she had dreamed of performing for an audience. Back then, she had imagined applause, recognition, and a sense of fulfillment. Now, she was experiencing a version of that dream, but in a much more intimate and surprising way. The audience was small, yet their attention was complete. The millionaire's presence added a layer of significance she had not anticipated, and it made her play with even more care and heart. Her hands moved more confidently, and her music became more fluid. The hesitant notes of the beginning were replaced by flowing melodies that filled every corner of the cafe. The old piano responded beautifully, producing sounds she had only hoped it could still make. It was as if the instrument and she had been waiting for this reunion, both ready to show what they could do together. Occasionally, she would glance up to see the expressions of those listening. The millionaire's face reflected a mix of surprise, admiration, and something deeper, a silent acknowledgement of her talent. The cafe owner looked like someone witnessing a small miracle, unable to hide his amazement. Even the customers who had come for coffee or a meal seemed to pause and absorb the beauty of the music. It was a shared moment, a connection between her and everyone present, brought together by sound and emotion. The music began to build toward a more dramatic passage. She let herself feel the emotions fully, allowing the notes to express what she could not put into words. Her fingers flew over the keys with precision, yet there was a fluidity, a sense of freedom that came from her love of music. She could hear the soft gasps and murmurs of admiration from the audience, but she did not let it distract her. Every chord, every melody was hers to shape, and she poured herself into it completely. By the time she reached the peak of her performance, the room was completely silent. Even the sounds of cups and plates had faded. Everyone's attention was on her, captivated by the unexpected brilliance of her playing. She could see the millionaire leaning forward slightly, his eyes wide with astonishment. For the first time that evening, she realized the full impact of her music. It was no longer just a personal expression. It was something that touched others deeply. When she finally ended the piece, the silence lingered for a moment, as if no one could believe what had just happened. Then came the soft sounds of applause, gentle but sincere. The cafe owner clapped his hands together, smiling broadly, and a few customers joined in. The millionaire remained quiet for a moment, absorbing the experience, then gave a slow, deliberate nod of approval. She felt a rush of relief and exhilaration, her heart pounding with pride and disbelief. She stood up from the piano, her hands still tingling from the intensity of playing. She took a deep breath and looked around the cafe. People were still smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply shaking their heads in amazement. She realized that something extraordinary had just happened in an ordinary place. The piano, the cafe, the simple act of taking a chance. It had all come together to create a moment she would never forget. The millionaire approached her, his expression a mix of admiration and curiosity. He did not speak immediately but extended his hand, a silent gesture of recognition. She shook it, still feeling the adrenaline from the performance. He spoke then, in a calm and thoughtful voice, praising her skill and the emotion she had conveyed. She felt her cheeks flush with pride, and a small, shy smile spread across her face. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She returned to her duties at the counter, but the energy in the cafe had changed. People were talking in hushed, excited tones, and she caught glimpses of impressed faces looking at her with newfound respect. The piano, once ignored and silent, had become a symbol of hidden talent and the unexpected joy that could appear in ordinary life. As she closed up for the night, she lingered near the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys one last time. The music had not just filled the cafe. It had filled something inside her as well. She had rediscovered a part of herself she had nearly forgotten, and she knew that this night was only the beginning. The opportunity had come unexpectedly, but she had taken it, and it had changed everything. The memory of this evening, the sound of the piano, and the astonished faces of those who had listened would stay with her forever. It was proof that sometimes, Hidden talents only need a small push to shine, and when they do, they can leave everyone, even the most unlikely observers, completely speechless. The next day, she arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. Her body was tired from the previous night, but her mind felt alive in a way it hadn't for years. She moved through her morning routine almost automatically, tying her apron, checking the supplies, and greeting the few early customers who had already arrived. Yet, her thoughts kept returning to the piano and the reaction of everyone from last night. She had played in front of the millionaire, and the memory of his astonished expression made her smile. It was hard to describe the mixture of pride and fear she felt. She loved playing, yet the idea of doing it again for others, even for regular customers, made her nervous. She wondered if last night had been a fluke or if she could truly share her talent without hesitation. The piano in the corner seemed to watch her, waiting for her decision. She knew that if she ignored it, the feeling of possibility would fade, but if she embraced it, her life might start to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The morning passed quietly, with the usual bustle of coffee orders and breakfast plates. She moved from table to table, serving with her usual care, but each glance at the piano added a spark of anticipation. She thought about the music she could play, the emotions she could express, and the way people had reacted. Her confidence began to grow, but so did a quiet tension, because she knew that sharing her gift fully required courage. When the lunch crowd arrived, she noticed that some customers were watching her more closely. Word had spread about her piano playing, though she didn't know how far. She served them with her practiced smile, but inside, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The piano called to her, and she realized that she could no longer ignore it. She needed to play again. A lull in the busy rush gave her a chance to approach the piano. She brushed her hands over the keys, feeling the smooth texture beneath her fingers. She took a deep breath and began to play. The notes started softly, delicate and tentative, like the first rays of dawn. Slowly, she built up the melody, each chord flowing naturally from her hands. The music was expressive, full of emotion, and it carried a story of longing, hope, and hidden dreams. Customers stopped talking, their attention drawn to the unexpected music. The sound filled the room, wrapping around them and creating a sense of calm and wonder. She noticed smiles forming, eyes widening in surprise, and even a few quiet murmurs of admiration. The atmosphere of the cafe transformed once again. It was no longer just a place to eat and drink. It became a small stage where music spoke louder than words. Her fingers moved with confidence, remembering patterns and melodies she had not played for years. She allowed herself to fully express the emotions she had carried inside for so long. The music was not just sound. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her dreams. She could feel a connection with the people listening, a silent understanding that this music was coming from a place of authenticity and heart. She glanced toward the millionaire, who had returned for another visit. He was leaning back in his chair, observing quietly but with intense focus. His expression showed admiration and surprise, just as it had the night before. She felt a surge of confidence seeing him react this way, but she reminded herself to focus on the music, not the audience. Every note she played was for her, for the music itself, and for the joy it brought to those who listened. As she continued, the complexity of her playing increased. She moved through different sections, soft and gentle, then bold and lively, each one expressing a different emotion. She lost herself in the rhythm and melody, forgetting the world around her. The cafe, the customers, even the sounds of plates and cups faded into the background. All that mattered was the music, the connection, and the way her heart poured itself into every note. The millionaire's reaction became more pronounced. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes tracking her fingers as they danced across the keys. His expression softened, with each passing moment, showing not only surprise but genuine appreciation. She realized that he had expected a simple tune, perhaps a basic melody, but what she offered was much more. It was music filled with skill, emotion, and years of unspoken dedication. The cafe owner watched from the corner, his usual bustling demeanor replaced with quiet amazement. He had known her as a reliable waitress, diligent and polite, but he had never imagined this hidden talent. His admiration was evident in his wide eyes and the way he leaned against the counter, completely absorbed in her playing. Even the regular customers, who had seen her every day, seemed to see her in a new light, as if discovering a completely new person. Time seemed to slow as she played. Each note was deliberate yet effortless, flowing naturally from her fingertips. She felt a sense of liberation she had not experienced in years. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice for her soul. She realized that sharing her talent, even in this small cafe, had the power to transform not just her own feelings, but those of everyone around her. As she moved toward the climax of the piece, the room was completely silent. Even the background noise of the cafe had vanished. All eyes and ears were on her. She could feel the tension, anticipation, and awe in the room. Each note resonated with the listeners, reaching into their hearts in ways that words could not. The music became a bridge, connecting her to everyone present, creating a moment of shared emotion and beauty. When she finally ended the piece, there was a moment of absolute silence, as if no one knew how to respond to the intensity of what they had just heard. Then came the soft clapping, hesitant at first, and then growing in confidence. The cafe owner clapped loudly, smiling broadly, while the customers joined in. The millionaire remained still for a moment, taking it all in before giving a slow, deliberate nod of approval. Her chest swelled with pride and a sense of accomplishment. She stood up from the piano, her hands trembling slightly from the intensity of the performance. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, a combination of relief and triumph. She had done something she had not dared to do in years, and the impact was greater than she could have imagined. People were looking at her differently now, not just as the waitress behind the counter, but as someone with extraordinary skill and passion. The millionaire approached her again, this time speaking directly. He praised her talent, her courage, and the emotion she had conveyed through the music. He asked her questions about her training, her inspirations, and whether she had considered performing more regularly. She answered, trying to stay composed, while a warm glow of pride and excitement spread through her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She returned to her usual tasks, serving drinks and clearing tables, but the energy in the cafe had shifted. People were more attentive, more respectful, and more interested in her presence. She realized that the music had created a ripple effect, changing the way she was perceived and how she felt about herself. The piano had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that hidden talents, when shared, could have a profound impact. As she closed up for the night, she lingered by the piano, letting her fingers brush over the keys one last time. She thought about the moments of connection, the surprised faces, and the astonishment in the millionaire's eyes. She knew that this was only the beginning of something new, a path that could lead to more opportunities, more recognition, and more moments of genuine expression. The piano had unlocked a part of her that had been waiting quietly, and now it was time to see where it could take her. The night ended with a sense of quiet fulfillment. She left the cafe feeling lighter, energized, and full of hope. She had faced her fear, embraced her talent, and touched the hearts of those around her. The memory of the music lingered, a constant reminder that extraordinary moments could arise from ordinary circumstances, and that courage, passion, and authenticity could leave even the most skeptical observers completely speechless. The morning after her second performance, she felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as she walked to the cafe. She had spent the night replaying the previous evening in her mind, remembering every note, every glance, every expression. Her heart raced with the possibility that today could bring more opportunities, or that it could fade into the ordinary routine once again. She pushed open the cafe door and took a deep breath, letting the familiar scent of coffee and pastries welcome her. The cafe was busier than usual, and she noticed that some of the customers were paying closer attention to her. There were quiet whispers among them, a sense of curiosity about the woman who had surprised everyone with her piano skills. She smiled politely as she moved between tables, serving drinks and taking orders, but the piano in the corner seemed to call to her even more insistently than before. She knew she could no longer treat it as a secret or a private indulgence. It was time to embrace the opportunity fully. During a brief lull in the afternoon, she approached the piano. Her fingers brushed over the keys, feeling their smooth surface beneath her touch. The memory of the melodies she had played flowed through her mind, and she took a deep breath before pressing the first note. The sound was familiar and comforting, and she felt a surge of courage as she began to play. The music started softly, gently filling the room with a sense of warmth and calm. As she continued, the piano seemed to respond to her emotions, producing a rich and expressive sound. The notes carried a story, one of hidden talent, hard work, and the dreams she had long kept to herself. Customers began to pause, some looking up from their conversations, others setting aside their phones to listen. The cafe transformed once again, becoming a place where music connected everyone in a shared experience of beauty and emotion. The millionaire returned that afternoon, sitting quietly near the piano as she played. His attention was fully on her, his usual composed expression replaced by genuine admiration. He had seen her talent before, but watching her play with growing confidence and emotion now made it clear that she was more than just a waitress with a hidden skill. She could feel his eyes on her, not in judgment, but in acknowledgement of her talent and potential. Her hands moved effortlessly over the keys, recalling patterns and melodies she had not touched in years. She allowed herself to express the emotions she had carried inside, pouring them into each chord and note. The music became a conversation, a dialogue between her and the audience, even if they did not speak. She felt a connection with everyone in the room, a shared understanding that this moment was special and extraordinary. As the piece progressed, the complexity and intensity of her playing increased. She moved from soft, delicate passages to bold, powerful chords, each one resonating with emotion and skill. The cafe owner watched in awe, unable to hide his amazement. Even regular customers, who had seen her daily routine countless times, seemed to see her in a completely new light. They realized that this woman, whom they had taken for granted, possessed a talent that could move and captivate anyone. The millionaire, known for his discerning taste and often reserved demeanor, showed clear signs of astonishment. His eyes followed her fingers, his expression softening with each passing moment. She felt a surge of confidence knowing that her music was having such an impact, but she reminded herself to focus on the performance itself, not the reactions. Every note mattered, and she wanted to give her best, to express herself fully through the piano. Time seemed to stretch as she played, each second filled with emotion and intensity. The music carried her through memories of childhood lessons, the long hours of practice, and the moments when she had doubted herself. Now all of that effort and emotion had a purpose. She was not just playing for herself, but for everyone who was listening, for the people whose hearts she could touch with her music. As the piece reached its climax, the cafe was completely silent. Every ear was attuned to the music, every eye focused on her. She felt the energy in the room, a mix of anticipation, awe, and admiration. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, carrying the full depth of her emotions. She realized that this moment, this connection with the audience, was a turning point. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She was a musician, recognized and appreciated for her skill and passion. When she finished, there was a brief pause, a moment of disbelief as everyone absorbed what they had just witnessed. Then came the applause, soft at first, then growing louder and more enthusiastic. The cafe owner clapped with genuine pride, and the customers joined in, their faces lighting up with admiration. The millionaire remained still for a moment, then nodded slowly, his expression one of deep appreciation. She felt a wave of relief and joy, knowing that her talent had been recognized and celebrated. After her performance, the millionaire approached her. He spoke in a calm and deliberate voice, praising her skill, the emotion she had conveyed, and her courage to perform in a public setting. He asked if she had ever considered performing for larger audiences or pursuing music more seriously. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unsure of how to respond. She had always dreamed of such opportunities, but reality and self-doubt had held her back. Now, faced with genuine recognition, she felt a spark of possibility that she could not ignore. The conversation left her both exhilarated and reflective. She realized that the piano had opened a door she had almost forgotten existed. It had not only allowed her to express herself, but also to connect with others in a profound and meaningful way. The applause, the astonishment, and the admiration were more than validation. They were proof that taking a chance could lead to unexpected and transformative experiences. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She continued her usual work, but the energy in the cafe had shifted. People were more attentive, more respectful, and more interested in her presence. The piano, once a quiet and overlooked instrument, had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that hidden talents could change the way others saw her and the way she saw herself. As she closed the cafe for the night, she lingered near the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. She thought about the moments of connection, the surprised faces, and the astonishment in the millionaire's eyes. She knew that this was not just a fleeting experience, but the beginning of something new. The piano had unlocked a part of her that had been waiting quietly, and now it was time to explore where it could take her. Walking home, she felt lighter and more energized than she had in years. She reflected on how a single moment, a choice to play and share her talent, had begun to shift her life. The fear and self-doubt that had held her back were still there, but they felt smaller, less powerful. She realized that courage, passion, and authenticity could create opportunities that seemed impossible at first. That night, she dreamed of music, of performing on larger stages, and of the joy it could bring to others. She imagined herself traveling, sharing her gift with people who would appreciate it, and inspiring those who had hidden talents of their own. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a key to a new life, a life where her abilities could be recognized and celebrated. The next morning, she returned to the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. She approached the piano, feeling a deep connection and gratitude for the opportunities it had brought. She knew that the journey ahead would require dedication, courage, and hard work, but she was ready to embrace it. The music had changed everything, and she was determined to see where it could lead. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive, knowing that her talent had the power to inspire, connect, and transform. The following week arrived with a sense of anticipation that she had not felt in years. The cafe was bustling as usual, but she moved through it with a new sense of purpose. Her heart still raced with excitement, thinking about the upcoming private event the millionaire had invited her to. It was an opportunity she had only dreamed of, yet here it was, real and tangible. She tied her apron, adjusted her uniform, and took a deep breath, feeling both nerves and exhilaration. All day, she found herself stealing glances at the piano. It had become more than just an instrument. It was a symbol of her courage and potential. She remembered the astonished faces of the millionaire, the cafe owner, and the customers who had witnessed her play. Those moments had changed her not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. The piano was no longer a silent companion. It was the key to possibilities she had never imagined. As the afternoon approached, she prepared for the event. The millionaire had arranged for her to perform at a private gathering in a nearby hall. It was a small, intimate setting, but the audience would be influential and discerning. The thought made her both nervous and determined. She packed a small bag with essentials and carried her sheet music, though she knew that most of the performance would come from memory and feeling. Every step she took toward the venue felt like a step into a new life. When she arrived, the room was already set, filled with elegantly dressed guests. The atmosphere was quiet, expectant, and slightly intimidating. She felt her pulse quicken, but she reminded herself of the past week, the surprise, the music, and the joy she had experienced in the cafe. Those memories grounded her, giving her the confidence she needed to perform. She approached the piano, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection before touching the keys. The first note rang out, soft and clear, cutting through the quiet of the room. She allowed the music to flow naturally, letting each chord and melody convey the emotions she carried inside. The audience listened in rapt attention, captivated by the unexpected depth and skill she displayed. She had played for others before, but never like this, never in a setting where every detail mattered. The piano became an extension of herself, her fingers translating her heart into sound. As she continued, her confidence grew. She moved through the music with ease, allowing the melodies to ebb and flow, gentle and powerful, expressing joy, longing, and determination. The guests were silent, absorbing every note, every nuance of the performance. Some leaned forward slightly, mesmerized by the skill and emotion that seemed to radiate from her hands. She felt a profound connection with the audience, a shared understanding that transcended words. The millionaire watched with quiet satisfaction, clearly impressed by her ability to captivate such a crowd. His expression reflected admiration, and he occasionally nodded, acknowledging her talent and poise. She felt a surge of pride, but she kept her focus on the music, letting it guide her and express the story she wanted to tell. Every note was deliberate, every melody a reflection of her journey from the cafe to this moment. As the performance progressed, she allowed herself to play more freely, exploring variations in tempo, intensity, and emotion. She remembered the small, quiet moments in the cafe, the reactions of the customers, and the joy she had felt when she first sat at the piano. Those memories gave her strength, helping her to express herself fully and authentically. The music carried her forward, a bridge between her past, present, and the possibilities of her future. By the time she reached the climax of the piece, the audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. The piano seemed to respond to her emotions, producing a richness and depth that filled the room. She felt a sense of liberation and fulfillment, realizing that she had overcome her fears and embraced her talent completely. The performance was no longer just about music. It was about courage, self-expression, and the power of hidden potential. When she finally finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the applause began, soft at first, and then building to a warm, enthusiastic ovation. Guests stood to show their appreciation, some smiling, some shaking their heads in amazement. The millionaire stepped forward, clapping and smiling, clearly proud and impressed. She felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her, knowing that she had succeeded in sharing her music with an entirely new audience. After the performance, many guests approached her, praising her talent, expressing admiration, and asking about her background. She spoke humbly, explaining that she had always loved music and had taken lessons as a child. They were amazed that someone who had worked as a waitress could display such extraordinary skill and emotion. She realized that her story, like her music, had the power to inspire and encourage others to pursue their own hidden talents. The millionaire invited her to perform at future events and suggested opportunities that could help her pursue music more seriously. She felt a mixture of excitement and gratitude, realizing that her life was opening up in ways she had never dared to imagine. The piano, once a quiet presence in a small cafe, had become a doorway to new possibilities, recognition, and personal fulfillment. Returning to the cafe a few days later, she was greeted with admiration and curiosity. Customers who had heard about her performance in the private event were eager to see her play again. The cafe owner looked at her with a proud smile, and she realized that her talent had transformed not only her own life, but also the way others saw her. She had gone from being just a hardworking waitress to someone whose abilities commanded respect and admiration. The piano in the corner no longer felt ordinary. It had become a symbol of courage, perseverance, and the transformative power of pursuing one's passion. Every time she played, she remembered the journey she had taken, the quiet moments of practice, the courage to perform in front of the millionaire, and the growing confidence that had carried her to the private event. Each note she played was a reminder of how far she had come and how much potential lay ahead. As the weeks passed, she continued to perform at the cafe, each time growing more confident and expressive. The audience, both familiar and new, was captivated by her talent and the emotions she conveyed through music. She discovered that her gift could touch people in ways she had never imagined, bringing joy, comfort, and inspiration. The experiences reinforced her belief that talent, when nurtured and shared, had the power to change lives. Her life slowly began to change in other ways as well. She started receiving invitations to perform at local events, small gatherings, and community celebrations. People admired her not only for her musical ability but also for her humility and dedication. Each opportunity reinforced her confidence and encouraged her to continue pursuing her passion. She realized that her journey was not just about performing music. It was about embracing her own potential and inspiring others to do the same. The piano became a constant companion, a source of comfort, joy, and self-expression. Every time she sat down to play, she felt a sense of purpose and connection that had been missing from her life. Music was no longer a hidden talent. It was a defining part of who she was. She knew that her journey was just beginning and that there were countless opportunities ahead. The experiences she had gone through, from the quiet cafe to the private event, had prepared her to embrace whatever came next. Looking back, she realized that the most important moments in her journey had not been the applause or recognition, but the courage to take the first step. Sitting at the piano for the first time in front of the Millionaire had been terrifying, but it had opened a door she could never have imagined. It had taught her that hidden talents and passions, when nurtured and shared, could transform not only her own life but also the lives of those around her. The story of her journey, from waitress to recognized musician, spread quietly through the city. People were inspired by her courage, her dedication, and the beauty of her music. She became a symbol of hope for those who had hidden talents, showing that it was never too late to embrace one's passions and share them with the world. Her life had changed in ways she could not have predicted, but she knew that the journey was ongoing, and the possibilities were endless. Every evening, as she returned to the cafe and sat at the piano, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had discovered the power of her own voice, the beauty of expressing herself through music, and the joy of connecting with others in meaningful ways. The piano had transformed her life, giving her confidence, recognition, and a sense of purpose that went far beyond the walls of the cafe. She had taken a chance, embraced her talent, and in doing so, she had shown everyone, including the Millionaire, that extraordinary things could emerge from the most ordinary beginnings. Her journey was a testament to the idea that courage, passion, and authenticity could change lives. She had begun as a waitress, working quietly and diligently, with a hidden talent and a dream tucked away. Through a combination of opportunity, bravery, and love for her craft, she had stepped into a new chapter of her life. The piano had become a symbol of her journey, and her music had become a bridge between her dreams and reality, inspiring everyone who had the privilege to listen.